It was an audacious debut, even by the dramatic standards of Chinese weapon systems. For months, Western reporters and analysts had heard rumors of photos surfacing and quickly disappearing on China's heavily censored internet of an advanced jet fighter similar in shape and dimension to the latest US and Russian designs. On Christmas Day 2010, another photo appeared, and this time it stayed online long enough for foreign observers to catch it. On Christmas Day 2010, another photo appeared, and this time it stayed online long enough for foreign observers to catch it. Bill Sweetman, a longtime aviation reporter then editing the Washington, D.C. trade journal Defense Technology International, was one of the first outside of China to comment in a widely read forum, namely the magazine's Aries blog. The picture, apparently snapped from a car driving past the Chengdu flight test facility in western China, allegedly shows China's next-generation Chengdu J-20 fighter, the first known Chinese stealth aircraft, undergoing high-speed taxi trials with rumors of a first flight within weeks, Sweetman wrote. The United States, France, Sweden, Russia, and an alliance composed of Britain, Spain, Italy, and Germany all design and build advanced fighter aircraft. Some of the United States and Russia's designs qualify as fully radar-evading fifth-generation or stealth aircraft, namely the U.S. F-22 Raptor and the F-35, and the Russian T-50. Until the J-20 appeared, China had been building less sophisticated fighters, most of them copies of a previous generation of Russian planes. While it should perhaps come as no surprise that the world's second-largest economy would eventually produce an advanced fighter aircraft, for some foreign observers, including a small but vocal community of air power apologists in Washington, a Chinese stealth fighter represents a unique threat to the existing world order. Sweetman warned in his initial reporting on the J-20 that the photo that was the only real evidence of the plane's existence could actually be a fake. A product of the Adobe OKB, he said, referring to Adobe's popular Photoshop image manipulation software and the Russian acronym for an aviation design bureau. But from December 25th, more photos appeared online, each clearer and more revealing than the last, offering proof that not only was J-20 real, but Beijing wanted the world to know it. Indeed, on January 5, 2011, the English-language Global Times newspaper, published by the Chinese Communist Party, underscored the latter point by printing a roundup of foreign reporting on the new jet fighter. Denial is not an option, Sweetman argued. He was right. China had joined the leading ranks of fighter-building nations, prompting a debate in the West and among China's immediate neighbors over if and when the J-20 might begin entering service in large numbers, and how that might shape the Pacific balance of power. All this means that a reliable and useful assessment depends on an accurate view of the J-20's design, plus a clear-headed consideration of the plane's industrial, political, and strategic context. But even taking the most favorable view of the J-20, it's hard to credibly claim that Chengdu has changed the world. Fighter forensics. When it comes to the J-20, the outside world only knows what it can infer from about a dozen blurry photographs snapped from outside the Chengdu fence line by Chinese aviation enthusiasts. In aggregate, the new fighter seems to be modestly stealthy and optimized for high-altitude flying and long range. By contrast, Western stealth fighters are generally tailored for radar evasion at the expense of other qualities. Russian models, meanwhile, have tended to emphasize range, speed, and heavy weapon loads. The J-20 appears to be large. Using for scale nearby ground vehicles in some of the snapshots, Sweetman estimated the J-20's overall length at around 70 feet. This is big for a fighter. Russia's Sukhoi T-50, a prototype that first flew in early 2010, and could form the basis of new operational long-range fighters for both Russia and India over the coming decade, is 66 feet long. The American F-22 and F-35, both built by Lockheed Martin, are just 60 and 50 feet long, respectively. Size places other characteristics in context. Most current fighters are capable of attacking targets in the air and on the ground, but the design process tends to emphasize one of those roles over the other, depending on the customer's needs. The F-22, for instance, is primarily an air-to-air killer. For that reason, the F-22 is designed to be fast, high-flying, and maneuverable. The follow-on F-35 is a bomber first and dogfighter second, so it trades some speed and maneuverability for payload and range. While sluggish compared with the F-22, the F-35 carries more bombs over longer range, despite its smaller overall size. The F-22 F-35 comparison aside, the bigger a fighter is, the more likely it is to be designed primarily for ground attack. It didn't take Sweetman long to decide that the J-20 looks like a stealth F-111, referring to the 1960s-era U.S. Air Force fighter bomber that most famously raided Libya from British bases in 1986, and 5 years later dropped laser-guided bombs to destroy hundreds of Iraqi tanks in Kuwait. The U.S. retired the F-111 in the mid-1990s, although Australia flew a handful until late last year. The F-111 had 2 engines, and true to its size, so does the J-20. Notably, several rear aspect photos seem to show traditional, fixed, round engine nozzles. The F-22, B-2 stealth bomber, and now retired F-117 stealth fighter bomber all have carefully shaped, angular nozzles meant to scatter radar waves. In the F-22, these nozzles can move, vectoring the engine thrust to boost maneuverability. The T-50 can pull the same vectoring trick with its round nozzles. The apparent absence of stealthy nozzles and thrust vectoring places a hard limit on the J-20's ability to evade radar detection from behind. But from the front, it's a different story. The J-20 has a chiseled nose and trapezoidal engine inlet similar to the F-22s and F-35s, and indeed the T-50s, indicating a potentially high degree of frontal stealthiness, useful for an aircraft that needs to fly straight toward an unmoving opponent on the ground. This reinforces Sweetman's assessment that the J-20 is a bomber as much as, if not more than, a fighter. Analysts Carlo Kopp and Peter Goon, writing for the Air Power Australia think tank, disagree with Sweetman's assessment. In a short written reaction to the J-20's appearance, Kopp and Goon argue that the new fighter is meant as a heavy interceptor, designed to fly deep into defended territory to shoot down the vital electronic warfare and command aircraft and aerial tankers that underpin U.S.-led air campaigns. This would significantly complicate, if not close down, air operations from Andersen, Air Force Base in Guam, and fixed basing in the Ryukyu chain, the Japanese main islands and Korean peninsula, during the opening phase of any contingency. The U.S. Navy's aircraft carriers would similarly be stripped of their planes by sweeping passes by J-20s, Kopp and Goon wrote. Whether Sweetman or his Australian counterparts are correct in their views of the J-20's intended role, all agree that the Chinese plane requires high degrees of stealth. But for all its stealthy design characteristics around the nose and inlets, the J-20 also features canards, small moving wings fitted forward of the main wing. Canards can add stability to highly maneuverable fighters meant to pull hard turns at low speed. At high speed, canards are generally useful for reducing airframe vibrations. In any event, canards are generally indicative of a less than harmonious design requiring bolt-on fixes. And as they add radar-reflecting edges, they're usually not stealthy,